countdown, and we're good to go.
Okay.
All right, great.
All right, just test the bigger for me real quick. Beautiful. Okay, one second.
You're good. Yeah. Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for the delay. My name is Dwayne James. I'm the Director of the Laboratory Services and Applied Science Division at EPA Region 9. I've been the director for the last 3 years after the agency did a realignment and created this new division. But prior to that, I was also the manager of the Science Services branch, which also covered laboratory QA and the regional science program. So this afternoon, I just want to share with you, showing the topics, the support we provide to tribes in FY22 and also our priorities for FY23. I want to give you an update on the lab relocation. I want to share with you scientific principles about scientific integrity, and then cumulative impacts analysis. This is a topic that's becoming very prominent now. I just want to alert you to what's going on, and then take some Q&A. And actually, throughout the session, feel free to ask questions. We don't need to wait till the end. So one of our big priorities last year was PFAS and sampling tribal drinking water systems. Last year at this conference, I shared what the plans were, and to actually kind of show, from a cradle to grave perspective, what's involved in doing analysis for environmental reasons. Our division has both the QA shop, where we review the quality assurance project plans. Some of you might be familiar with those as a result of being a grant recipient. Anytime we take environmental samples, it has to be, the QAP has to be submitted to EPA for review. So our QA office is involved in that, and then the lab actually does the analysis. So in this case, the water division made it a priority to sample small tribal drinking water systems. Basically, it was voluntary. Any tribe that wanted EPA to sample their wells or the drinking system, they just had to self-identify. We would collect the samples and run those analysis. So it was pretty much a very big undertaking, because PFAS is one of those also emerging contaminants, and it's a lot of concerns about it. So definitely it brings some sort of measure of calm and relief for residents know that the water doesn't have any PFAS. So that's the work that we did this past year. And we actually sampled about 13 different systems from different tribes. We analyzed close to 300 samples and provided the results to those drinking water purveyors. So I don't know if any of you here in attendance see your tribe listed, but as you can see, it's a fair number of different tribes that we provided that support to in FY22. And we always remain available and willing to continue to provide additional sampling if the need arises. So the other priority before I get to that, sorry. In terms of what's on the horizon, PFAS is, again, continue to be a very big topic. So one of the things we'll be doing, and I'll talk about the lab relocation in a minute, in Corvallis, we plan to stand up method 533. That's one of the drinking water methods for PFAS. So as soon as we get our accreditation, our plan is to actually get that method stood up. This past year, it's one of those. What do you say? What it is? Sorry.
Describe the method.
I cannot actually describe the method for you, but I see I have a Bob in the audience here.
Okay. EPA's Athens.
Hold on.
EPA's Athens lab has been working on that. The method, you correct me if I'm wrong on this, Glenn, but they're still working on the method, so it hasn't been completely defined yet. You can contact, I think it's Brian Schumacher. He's the director of the Athens lab.
So which one, sorry, but are you talking about 533 or another method?
It's, I think 533 is the congeners, just it's PFAS, but not all individual congeners.
Yeah,
Because the Athens lab is working on all of them, all of them.
okay. On 533, I know you can analyze up to about almost 40 different types of PFAS. There was an older method, 537, which had a smaller subset. To answer your direct question in terms of the techniques that are used and so on, I'm not the expert, sorry. But I can find that information for you and share it with you. Yeah, I'm sure if you look it up online, you'll see it. I mean, it's kind of I'm not the lab manager, so I don't know all of the different analysis like that. But I'm going to learn that. Now that you asked me that question, that's my homework. Another method that's not listed, but we're also going to stand up is 1633, which is a method that has been under development in coordination with the Department of Defense. The reason for that particular method is it can do other types of matrices, so soil, groundwater, surface water, other types of analysis that would be required to determine if there's any PFAS. So that's actually a very big method. It's currently going on the multi-lab validation at this point. So just something to be aware of. Then in terms of MCLs, the draft MCL is expected by December of this year, and then a final by December of 2023. So then you'll know exactly for the drinking water systems, the levels of P4 and PFAS, making sure that those levels aren't exceeded. The bipartisan infrastructure law has provided a lot of funding for PFAS water infrastructure development and treatment. So check with the water division representatives there, those especially administering the grants. If you have a system that you think you might need some assistance, there's lots of funds available to address PFAS. There's going to be a new UCMR coming up pretty soon. That's basically nationwide sampling. So that should be scheduled sometime next year into 2025. And then the treatability database, the text that is in blue, that's actually hyperlinked. So when you go to the materials for this meeting, you can actually get links to all of the information that I'm presenting here. I've also uploaded certain documents as well for easy reference, but in terms of getting the links from the actual presentation, you'll be able to connect to that. And then just in time for my moderator, harmful algal blooms. This has been an issue for many, many years, and it's basically all across the country. When nutrients increase, nitrogen, phosphorus, it leads to this algal blooms, and then when there's certain conditions, the spores emitted, this microcystin, and it's harmful not only to humans but also to pets. We've heard of pets being killed and so on as a result of exposure to HABs and the microcystin. We've been doing this analysis for many years to support many of our tribal partners here in Region 9 and also non-tribal parties. And we see that area continue to emerge a lot in terms of the significance and just trying to deal with it with climate change and other environmental changes. There's just been an increase in HABs. Also wildfires, that seems to be also contributing to the increase in HABs across the country. Last year, we actually sampled over 600 samples for our tribal partners here. I've identified Big Lagoon, Hooper, Karuk, and Yurok. The Klamath is what we've been doing for many, many years. That goes back to 2006, I believe, when we stood up the ELISA method. So it's really been a great support for the tribes up there because of the dams and the Klamath and just so many other issues, the warming of the water. They've actually had to significant impacts due to the HABs on the Klamath. So our goal is just to continue providing that support, providing technical assistance to any tribes, be it whether they want to send us samples or just technical assistance on how it can be done or the types of methods to use to run their own analysis for those tribes that have labs of their own. That's something we can also discuss with you. And yeah, it's a lot of the postings, that's kind of just been something that's been so critical and helpful. Normally at the lab, our standard turnaround for samples is like 30 days. Generally, we would do, on average, it's more like 20 to 25 days. But for this particular analysis, 24 hours. Basically, it's 24 hours, just 24 to 48 hours, just to let you know what the results are. It might take a few extra days just to get the documentation submitted to you. But at least you know what the results are, and if you have to post any advisories, you can do so. So when it comes to imminent health and endangerment, I mean, we just put a premium on being a very expeditious turnaround times for results. Moving on to the QA branch. Audrey Johnson, who has attended these meetings for many, many years, I think she might be participating virtually this year. She wasn't able to attend in person, but she's the manager of our QA branch. She was a former project officer in the water division, so it's really great having her as part of the LSASD team and being able to head up our QA branch. This past year in FY22 provided support to Northern Arizona on sampling analysis plans. As you can see, when it comes to certain demographics, especially children's health, this is something that the agency has also put a premium on in terms of providing support. With her office and her team reviewed 81 tribal quality assurance plans, the QAPs, and also helping out on the technical systems audits for the air monitoring. So it's those tribes that have some air monitoring program in place. We work hand in hand with the Air and Radiation Division to conduct those technical support audits and provide that support. So that's Audrey's shop. So for FY23, I'll just kind of give you a high level view of our planned activities for support. PFAS and HABs are going to continue being a priority for us. And of course, if there's another emerging contaminant that comes out, I mean, we'll just have to add it to the list. I mentioned the methods will be standing up in Corvallis. Then in terms of QA, continue to provide support to the tribes, and also with the upcoming revisions that are planned for the agency's guidance for quality management plans and QAP standards. We want to make sure that tribes are given the opportunity to review and provide comments in terms of those document updates. And I, again, continue to help out Air and Radiation Division on the tribes on regulatory air monitoring issues. And then on regional science, that's one of those areas that will continue to work with you, and also really working with the other programmatic divisions at Region 9 on any issues that might be of concern to a tribe, where the division can partner with tribes in terms of putting together a project, proposing a project, and then we get funding from the Office of Research and Development to actually do one of those projects. I'll be talking about one of those projects as an example later on. Chris Frey, who's is the Assistant Administrator for Office of Research and Development, he's actually here at the conference this year, and I think there was a session yesterday with Meet Chris. So that's his shop, and that's who we partner with in terms of getting that funding. So moving on to lab relocation. For many years, our lab was in Richmond, California, since the early 90s. Back in a few years ago, a decision was made to consolidate that operation with EPA's ORD laboratory in Corvallis as a cost-saving measure. The picture on the left is the laboratory in Richmond, California, and then the picture on the far right is the campus in Corvallis. It's actually on the campus of Oregon State University. So we actually, it was like 4 or 5 years leading up to that actual planned relocation, as you would imagine, all the planning that's involved. The facility on the right actually had to be renovated, and that was completed last year. And then since then, we've been in the process of moving equipment and getting it stood up. So I won't read through all of this, just to kind of give you a little flavor as to some of the things that we've had to do in terms of this timeline. Basically, November of last year, almost a year or so ago, we moved up all of the equipment, we shipped it to Corvallis. We also had to hire staff because none of the staff, both EPA and contractors that were in Richmond, relocated to Corvallis. So in addition to standing up a new laboratory where we just have to get the equipment moved and plugged in and everything like that, we have to hire brand new staff, including the lab manager. So it's really been a big effort underway for this past year for us. We are almost there. One of the things that we need to have done is to get accreditation for the methods we want to start running. We're an accredited lab, and that's one way of ensuring that we have the third-party auditor that comes in to review our methods and our setup and to make sure that everything is okay. And once we get the green light, we can actually start taking the samples and running it. We're hoping that we can get them on board by the end of this year. Right here we say in February, but I'm actually hoping it will be much sooner than that, so that we can actually get started. I mean, we've been down for very long. A lot of the work that we did, just to clarify, the work that we did this past year, we actually subcontracted it out. So we got the samples, and then we had subcontracted laboratories that actually conducted the analysis for us. But it's one way of trying to make it seamless to our customers, rather than having them trying to find, for example, the water division tried to find labs to run the analysis for PFAS. We just accepted the samples on their behalf, and then we actually found the contract labs for them to run the analysis. So it was very seamless to our customers. So that's kind of where we are on the lab. Any questions before I jump onto scientific integrity? Okay. Any online? Okay, thanks. So scientific integrity, and some of you might be wondering, well, why am I bringing up this topic in this conference? If you'll indulge me, I think you will see the connection. So a lot of it is about following the science. And I have this quote here from Bill Ruckelshaus. He was actually the first EPA administrator under Nixon. And then he came back in the 80s when EPA had gone into a dark spot in its history, a dark place in its history. And he came back essentially to restore confidence in the agency. So he's the only administrator that has served twice. But there are three things he said, which was follow the science, follow the law, and be transparent. And I think those three governing values and principles are something that really, as an agency, when we follow those, that allows us to instill the confidence in the public that, the decisions that we are making are free from, as you can see, the lightning rods on top, bias. There's, I can't read from this side. Fabrication, falsification, plagiarism, interference, and censorship. Thank you. Interference is a very big one, as you would imagine. It's more about, and even censorship, it's where scientists are doing their work, but at certain levels, for whatever reasons, they might feel some sort of pressure to alter the results in order to put forth a document or paper that maybe some other people would rather see. So with scientific integrity, the idea is to make sure that we adhere to professional values and practices when engaging in supervisors. So that means the managers all the way up to the highest levels, managing, influencing, communicating, and utilizing the results of science. The whole goal is to ensure objectivity, clarity, reproducibility, and the utility of science. Here's a quick history of scientific integrity, at least at EPA, and then I'm going to get into the connection for this audience. Goes back to 2009 with a presidential memo, Obama, on scientific integrity. EPA was one of the first agencies to actually put together a scientific integrity policy, and that was done back in 2012. In 2020, we put forth this paper which talks about expressing and resolving different scientific opinions. And let's be honest, that's a whole aspect of science, which is we all have different perspectives. We can see data, but we can have professional opinions as to the interpretation of that data. And what this policy allows for is, if, for example, on a team, you might find that there might be different opinions as to what the science means or how that should influence a decision. Whatever decision is made, if there are scientists who do not agree with it, they are free and they are allowed to put on the record the differences with that decision. And this is just a way of making sure that, there's science, but the agency also looks at other factors when it establishes policy. So to the extent that a scientist wants to go on record to say, well, I disagree for this reasons, they actually are allowed to do that. And that's what this document and this procedure does. And I think it's a very good thing to have. That way no one feels like they are muzzled or their voice is not heard. They do get to offer that out. And then when President Biden took office, as you can see on those dates, and it's all hyperlinked, so you can actually pull this up yourselves, they issued the Protecting Public Health and Environment and Restoring Science to Tackle Climate Crisis, and the other one, Memorandum on Restoring Trust in Government Through Scientific Integrity and Evidence-Based Policy Making. This is a result of trying to restore the full faith in EPA and the federal government as a whole in terms of the appropriate use of science in decision making. Some of the things of the January 27, 2021 action items is a task force to review scientific integrity across federal government. Every agency had to create a chief science officer. That was something new that had never been done before. And then also science advisory bodies. We've had this science advisory body at EPA for a very long time, but there are many agencies that did not have that. So that's one of the results of it. So my question, the question you may still be asking, well, why scientific integrity? Why am I talking about it? And actually, I see it the theme of this conference, and there's a lot of discussions about TEK. There's actually a good connection between the two. They actually complement each other. I was in a session yesterday, and I can't remember the lady's name, but she made a comment about TEK. TEK is putting the science back in science. And the scientific integrity policy is actually trying to put the science back into science at the federal levels. But more importantly, all federal agencies now have to develop scientific integrity policies. And that's something that I know tribes work with. Besides EPA, tribes work with many other federal agencies, BIA, USDA. I'm sure there are a whole list of other agencies and departments that you work with. All of them are going to be required to come up with the scientific integrity policies as well. And the point I want to underscore is, as you are working with EPA or any other federal agency, as you think about TEK and the information and the observations, that, when you look at your ecosystems and how things have changed over the years, those observations, that information, a lot of that can feed into decisions that are going to be made going forward to factor it in. Because when you talk about science, many times people think it's just strictly a data thing, or here's the experiment, here's the results, it's just black and white and so on. Many times there are gaps in information, gaps in data. But that's where we use professional judgment and professional expertise in terms of making recommendations. And the scientific integrity policy actually recognizes that where, in the absence of that type of information, where a scientist is expressing a professional opinion about a particular matter, that gets significant weight. And I kind of just want to mention that because it's something that a principle you can incorporate into your conversations with EPA or other federal agencies when you recognize that for example, the information about TEK might influence a particular decision-making aspect of what's going on, that's an opportunity to make that connection. So I just kind of wanted to highlight it for your benefit. So with that, I want to move on to cumulative impacts analysis. And as I mentioned at the start, that's a very hot topic right now. There are many efforts underway to address cumulative impacts. Just a little bit of a background on it. President Biden back in 2021 as well issued these executive orders on environmental justice and equity. As a result of this executive orders, EPA issued its equity action plan back in April of this year. And here are the 6 actions in that plan. It's hyperlinked, or you can look it up online as well. It's all publicly available. The first action is to develop a comprehensive framework for conducting cumulative impacts in relevant EPA decisions and operations, and operationalize the framework in EPA's programs and activities. EPA has established a deadline of September of 2023, September 30th, 2023, to come up with this framework. Other aspects of the action plan is to build the capacity of underserved communities to provide the experience to EPA and implement community-led projects. This is really about people's lived experiences and how that can be factored into decision-making. The third one is about EPA's internal capacity to engage communities and implement clear and accountable processes. And again, it's really for us as an agency to step it up, essentially. We've done a lot, but there's also more that we can do as an agency, and that's what the administrator is committed the agency to do. Action number 4 is strengthen EPA's external civil rights compliance program. If you're not aware, EPA actually just established that Office of External Civil Rights. It was stood up at the end of September, I believe, or early October. So that's a new program office in headquarters. And that's to handle civil rights, Title VI, civil rights actions regarding environmental issues. And also action number 5, integrating community science into EPA's research and program implementation. And then the procurement, that's another aspect of it. I'm going to talk a little bit more about action number 5, which is EPA's research and program implementation. And that's the report that the Office of Research and Development finalized on September 30th of this year. And the report is here. It's part of the background materials in this session, and you can also find it online. But it identifies definitions, research gaps, and barriers to implementing cumulative impacts research at EPA, and the recommendations for research going forward. I'm going to skip that previous slide. I'm going to just cover this first and go back to that previous slide. So in terms of definitions, and I say this is ORD definitions, that's what's in the report. And the reason I say that is there isn't a one-size definition or one-size-fits-all definitions for cumulative impact. Sometimes people think cumulative impacts and they might be talking about cumulative risk assessments. And even within various state and agencies, there's this variation on the definition. But just for our own purposes and discussion today and what ORD publish, cumulative impacts are defined as the totality of exposures to the combination of chemical and non-chemical stresses and their effects on health, well-being, and the quality of life outcomes. And then a cumulative impacts assessment is defined as a process of evaluating both quantitative and qualitative data representing cumulative impacts to inform a decision. So if you want to look at this graphic, just think about it in terms of here you are and your community, you know the status of your health and the quality of life. Non-chemical stresses, that would be like a plant, some industrial plant, in its proximity to your residence, emissions from that plant. Those are the chemical stressors. Non-chemical stressors would be traffic, for example. Do you live near a freeway where there's lots of noise? that actually disrupts your quality of life. When you think about systems biology, it might be your genetics or just kind of who you are. And then activities, behaviors, the things that you engage in. You can see the concentric rings there about who you are, and then what impacts they have on your life and your well-being. And then you take it out further. There's policies, decision-making, services, infrastructure, etc., discriminatory practices. In terms of when, so you have one facility in your neighborhood, and then the permitting agency allows another facility to be situated or sited in your community. That's adding additional. So again, that's a decision that's actually adding more stresses to your community and your well-being. And then the total environment is just your natural environment, social environments. And so the reason I'm mentioning this is, again, this is really emerging in terms of a very big topic. And as a result of the Biden executive orders and so on, it's really about empowering communities to be more vocal and more involved about the impacts to their communities and things that they can do. So I want to just give you a sense as to what's happening at the national level. This particular example is also in that report, and this is just serendipity. One of the authors of that report is actually in the audience, Bob Hall. He actually, former EPA employee, and this is a project that they proposed back in 2016 or something like that. Essentially, this is looking at the Colorado River, and with a lot of HABs and just a deterioration of the quality of that river, especially below the dams and so on. So they wanted to look at native lands and a floating vegetated garden to see if that would improve water quality. And that was the study occurred over like a 2 to 3 year period, I believe. I think they finalized the report in 2021. But the nice thing about that was they integrated tribal ecological knowledge to design and plan the floating vegetated islands using native plants from the lower Colorado River. And they tried to determine whether or not it would absorb excess nutrients to reduce the HABs, the nitrogen and the phosphorus. And the results from that study were successful. It showed that, the floating gardens has kind of acted like a wetlands in some respects, because what had happened once the river was dammed, a lot of the river basin, that was a wide basin which was kind of silty and so on, that would absorb a lot of nutrients, that was eliminated once the river was channelized and the river banks were eliminated. So this was a way of actually using TEK, incorporated into an idea to see how it could actually help improve the environment. And this is one of the examples that is in the ORD research report, in terms of showing that there's so many things that you can look at when you think about the cumulative impacts in a given area. And why I like this particular example, when you have a chance, or if you have a chance, go look at the report. It's also included in the additional materials for this session and also available online. You can see photographs that go back to the early 1900s, how the river basin looked then, and in terms of what things are right now. And that's the issue about cumulative impacts. It's decisions build upon decisions, build upon decisions, and where you are today is a result of a myriad of decisions that have been made over the years. So when we talk about cumulative impacts, it's looking at, well, okay, this is what we have today. If we want to propose a new site or a new facility or something else, well, what's going to be the cumulative impacts of adding this new set of stresses to a community, or decisions about a particular habitat or ecosystem? Yes, decisions have been made. We can change those decisions because we are where we are today. But going forward, what can we do differently to prevent any more degradation of the environment, any more degradation of conditions to to the well-being of communities? So that's kind of where cumulative impacts is right now. I'm hoping that at next year's conference, we'll have that final framework, and I can actually provide a lot more information about what the framework is and how you can actually go about doing the cumulative impacts analysis if that's something of interest for your tribe or for your community. And that's the last of my slides, so willing to take any questions if you have any. Yeah, we have one question in the back, and then can you get the mic, please? Thank you. Just, yeah.
Thank you. This is just a curiosity question. Was there or historically floating islands on the Colorado River?
Bob? No. I think what happened was there was kind of wetlands and that type of habitat. And once the dams were constructed and the river was channelized, all of that was eliminated. So the floating gardens, that concept is really to simulate a wetlands. You know, so to kind of a pilot project to say, well, this was the ecosystem back then in the 1900s and before. If we were to kind of reproduce that ecosystem using this vegetative island, let's see how it addresses the nutrients, you know, the phosphorus, the nitrogen, and it was a very successful project.
Are you the right person to ask about research projects or?
Kind of, sort of. Matt Small is our regional science liaison, but Matt's part of my team. So,
I have a question about PFAS.
Okay.
So it seems that the engineering community is pushing the membrane filtration for PFAS treatment and for pharmaceutical treatment. And the membrane filtration system is high cost. It's high dollar because of the design, because you have to use a lot of pressure, which is energy intensive. Then because of all the pieces that are involved, it's high maintenance also. There is a study done by Princeton in 2019 that found a microbe that really eats up PFAS like crazy. And there's a company called Annex Caldness that makes a plastic disc. It looks like a waffle. It's probably about maybe an inch in diameter. And it is structured in a way that it promotes both aerobic and anaerobic microbial growth. So the basic process involves nothing but a basin with the discs on the bottom for a substrate. Then you put your bacteria in there and you feed it until the bacteria grow. And then after the bacteria grow, then you can add your water and the bacteria will eat the PFAS, the pharmaceuticals, the whole bit. And that is the cost for that system is, I mean, it's so simple. It's millions of dollars cheaper. So how can your lab begin a research project on that to see the effectiveness of it and how we can actually implement it? Because from what I understand, the only other part that is needed, because it is self-cleaning, when you use an aerator in another basin, because microbial growth, I mean, if it grows so much, then it just obviously just sloughs off.
Right.
So it's basically self-cleaning. So you're taking out the maintenance issue, you're taking out the high pressure, high electricity dollar entity, and you're taking out the massive replacement of parts. So how can that be implemented for the research?
That's a good question. And I probably want to get your contact information so we can follow up. Because that sounds very intriguing to me. But in terms of it might be, for example, some of the research projects this is a perfect example of this. This is where we got money. I think we got like $100,000 from ORD to do this research. Or it might be a little bit more than that. But we could certainly look at that type of, as a potential pilot project just to see how it would work. I'm going to go back a few slides to, let's see, where was that? No, go back. Drinking water treatability database. I would also refer you to that. This is hyperlinked to see if that particular technology is already identified. Because what we did here was just to say, here's what's out there. What's very interesting about yours, the study you just mentioned, is that for a lot of the treatments out there, the problem is, what do you do with the waste? You know, like if you have a granular activated carbon bed that's absorbing or polishing a drinking water system, you know, then you still have that gap. And how do you get that PFAS out of it?
Well, the thing about this is that the microbes actually digest it, so that there is really no waste.
That's what I'm saying. That's what's really fascinating about that study, because that the waste is how to handle the waste. That's been a big issue with all of those PFAS treatment systems right now. So that sounds very exciting. So I'd like to get your contact information. Matt Small, he's also our PFAS technical expert at Region 9. Like I said, he's part of my team. So he and I work hand in hand on PFAS and also cumulative impacts analysis.
I just want to mention that there's somebody in the chat virtually that also likes the idea of solution-oriented question to research and test feasibilities.
Great. We have another question in the...
It's more of a comment. I've been texting with Brian Schumacher. I'd like to get your information as well. There's a possibility that something like this could be done as a rare or rhesus. Again, talking with Matt on that, because Brian seems to be intrigued. So,
yeah. Any other questions or comments? We have one here.
I just wanted to ask if the study on the Colorado River, is that going to be applied to other water systems that aren't rivers, like lakes or ponds?
I think it all depends on the entity. This is just a research study and showed it's promising. So the results are there. So the application is really up to a tribe or a given entity to say, well, let's look at our situation and could we actually apply these principles and science techniques to some sort of remediation or so on. What we're just presenting is just the results of the research and how promising it's been. A good question. Okay, if anything online? Okay, well, I really appreciate your time coming. It's always good to have folks come out and hear what we do. We're one of the smaller divisions. We don't give up money, so I know I'm not always going to get a big crowd. So, but I do appreciate your time and your coming out to listen to what I had to present. And feel free to reach out to me anytime. Here's my contact information, or you could just look it up easily and just reach out to us. And if I can't answer the question, I will definitely point you in the right direction. And I've already been given a homework assignment on 5:33. So thanks, everyone. Thanks to those online for joining. Take care.